Hello, I'm John McNamara. Welcome to this IBM Hursley hangout. We're in the lovely Innovation Centre in Galileo and IBM Hursley. I'm here with Leif Davidsen, Mike Jewson, Matt Roberts. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. So we're going to talk about digital transformation, and we're going to talk about the role of messaging, the integration bus, and API management. But probably the first thing we need to do is to go in the room and say who we all are. Leif, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Leif Davidsen. I'm the Senior Offering Manager for IBM's messaging portfolio, which primarily involves all of the MQ products.
And Mike, yourself?
I'm Mike Jewson. I'm an Offering Manager for the Integration Bus suite of products, and I've had a long association with Integration Bus over a number of years.
Marvellous. And Matt, yourself?
My name is Matt Roberts. I'm one of the product architects in the development team for API management.
All right, so let's begin with messaging. So Leif, just to set the scene, can we give an introduction to messaging, what it is and why it's important?
Sure. So messaging, as it's widely understood in this particular context, and the word messaging has lots of different meanings, is we're generally talking here about enterprise messaging, which is the movement of data in the form of messages between applications, systems, and services. So when you want to exchange data, rather than maybe opening a process channel or something like that, we're actually talking about packaging that data up as a message, taking that data from the application to a middleware layer, having the middleware layer move that to the destination, and then having the data unpacked from the message and delivered to the receiving application system or service.
Okay, so that sounds grand. Why would that be important to an enterprise?
That's important to an enterprise because if you think about scaling up, if you just have one application wanting to send one piece of data to another application, so well, that's easy, and yes, that is easy. However, when you have a number of applications, maybe scaling up to the dozens, hundreds, or even thousands and tens of thousands, as some of our customers have, but even a small handful, once you start sending more than one message, once you start sending multiple messages over a longer period, you start running the risk of encountering failures.
Right.
And so if you are sending data where it's actually important data, you really care about it delivering successfully, you need to say, okay, I need to understand both within the sending program and the receiving program, what happens if the communication fails, if the data isn't received or isn't received correctly, or any number of circumstances. So you start to build into your application programs what happens if things go wrong. What happens if the network's down, the application's down, the data's incorrect, there's some disruption in the data. And suddenly, as you look at your application actually dramatically increases in size and complexity to simply deal with the what happens if nature of communication. And your application programmers, who are valuable resources and spending their time on making your business more valuable, are in fact wasting their time coding everything. Whereas if you use messaging, which is all of that code can be held in the middleware layer, the application developer can then focus on just saying, I'm packaging up the data as a message and handing it off. That's all I need to do.
So I can see a benefit of that immediately. So you might have a developer coding an application to find the cheapest flights, for example. So the application can focus on that rather than also focusing on the plumbing, which is what happens if it goes down, high availability, the actual blocks of how to deliver a message successfully, reliably. That's all abstracted away, and they can focus that application on purely delivering value to the business.
Absolutely, it's all about, I have any number of different qualities of service I want to go for. Do I just want to deliver the data and I'm okay with it, or actually this is really important, critical data, I need to know it's delivered once and once only. I need to know that the data I send is the data that's arrived and it hasn't been changed in any way. I need to know that the data can't be read, can't be seen because it's valuable customer data or business data. I need to know that if one side falls over, that the data is held. All of those can be set through options, and the programmer doesn't need to code any of that. They can just focus on that business task that they've been given.
Makes sense. So we've spoken about messaging. So how does MQ relate here? Can you give us an overview of MQ and why you might want to use it for this purpose?
Well, MQ has been the market leader in delivering enterprise messaging middleware for about 22 years now. So all of those problems we described have been very clearly understood for a long time. And MQ was really the program that created the business momentum to actually use messaging as a solution for those problems. IBM first started selling it 22 years ago. We've been adding and enhancing it ever since then, and it continues as really the market leader in this segment now. So if one of the benefits is not only does it support a number of standards that have grown up around the space, but it is itself the de facto standard, such that you know that as a programmer, if you're coding to MQ, that you know that the other end of your messaging exchange, you can rely on MQ really being a good solution because it's available across multiple platforms, multiple operating systems, and as if both sides, and this is an important point maybe for later in the Hangout, MQ is very good at communicating with MQ. There are other business problems around integration, which is, well, what happens if both ends aren't MQ? And maybe we'll get to that when Mike covers it. But MQ itself focuses on one thing and one thing only, which is communicating to other messaging endpoints that also talk MQ.
You make a good point on the number of platforms that it covers, because you may well have a particular type of functionality that's possible on the Z machine, ZOS,
Yes.
like the shared queue facility that you can take advantage of with MQ. Which is another reason to use it to support your enterprise, especially if you have those platforms to hand. So what would be the benefit to the developers and the developers on coding an application using MQ? I guess we've touched on it a little bit, haven't we?
Well, it is actually all about the application and all about the developers. No one wakes up sadly in the morning and says, I want to do some MQ today. I'm going to get out, I'm going to buy MQ, I'm going to use MQ. It's all about enabling the business, enabling the applications. And what we want to say to the application developers, you go and write the best application you can on the preferred platform of choice. From a development point of view, from a production point of view, you want to have the developer having freedom of movement, really. Allow them to code the application that they want to code, with the knowledge that MQ will support that application on whichever program or platform it's running on. So, okay, I'm a developer, I want to code on Linux. That's great. I'm an enterprise developer and I'm really used to running and coding applications that run on ZOS. That's great. I need to connect between the two. That's great, because MQ runs on Linux, it runs on X, Windows, ZOS, ISO, every major commercial platform has an MQ implementation, and therefore your application developer can code to MQ on their platform and they can exchange the data to other platforms.
Fantastic. One of the things that really impressed me about MQ is its ability to provide levels of high availability. Could you talk through that a bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a number of different ways of achieving high availability. You already mentioned on Z, on the mainframe platform, you have shared queues, which is absolutely a pinnacle of availability. So always making sure the system and the data can be available in the case of failure. There are other ways if you're deploying your queues on Linux or on Microsoft or other platforms. You can have both system level Microsoft clusters, for example. You can have Veritas clustering. You can have IBM Power HA. So hardware-based availability solutions. MQ itself has what we call multi-instance queue managers. So you can have an active queue manager and effectively a shadow queue manager in standby, just watching and ready with the same access to the same messages to take over if the queue manager that's actually active fails in some way. You can have a failover. And we now have a new MQ appliance where you have, again, another HA solution where you have, in a matter of seconds, you can bring up a queue manager on appliance in a high availability mode, and you have these messages replicated across from appliance to appliance, and the ability to have a queue manager start up within seconds of a failure to provide really that business continuity, that high availability that so many businesses need to provide as they move into a very much a digital environment where everything's on, everything's available.
Understood. And I can't imagine the complexity of the adding an application to try and code that in to support your business.
Absolutely.
Understood. Okay, so can we give a summary and an outline of how messaging and MQ would help drive this digital transformation for an enterprise in that case, Leif?
Well, in my view, digital transformation is really making sure that you don't have any islands of data that are disconnected. Everything in a business should be valuable. Everything should be actually enhancing the business, enhancing the customers, enhancing the partners.
Yeah.
And so what we are seeing is new applications being coded every day, new data being created. And MQ really should be at the heart of actually connecting those applications, those data, with the parts of the business or the parts of the wider ecosystem that can make use of that data. So some parts of the ecosystem will be producing data, other parts will be consuming it, and messaging is about the reliable, simple, secure, rapid dissemination of data from where it's being created to where it can be consumed. And that to me is providing the beating heart of a digital transformation.
Fantastic. We down here at the Innovation Centre in Hursley, particularly if you're a business partner, you can come down, use the facilities for free, use our hardware for free, use our software for free if you're putting together an application. So get in contact with me if you'd like to try out this wonderful thing called MQ. All right, so Leif, thank you, buddy, much appreciated. I guess really this leads really nicely into Mike and integration. So Leif, you give the foundation of messaging. Could you give us a brief introduction to integration and why that's so important to the enterprise?
Yes, sure. So enterprises today often have a very large number of back-end systems. And in order to get value out of those back-end systems, it means connecting those back-end systems together. Without an integration engine to help you do this, it means that you have an awful lot of connections, each one being bespoke between the different systems to gain value from them. And so let's say you've got n back-end systems, then you may have potentially n squared number of connections between those systems. So you can see just by adding yet another back-end system, or it can increase the complexity no end. So if you put an integration layer in there, it means that you have a single connection to the integration layer from each of your back-end systems. And so the problem of n squared just becomes a problem of n then, and becomes much simpler. Now, a great advantage of having a single point of contact for all your data in this integration engine, like Integration Bus, is that then you've got an opportunity to do more advanced things as well. If you have all your data going through a single point, like an Integration Bus, it means perhaps you can apply some real-time analytics to do some insight work to detect things, perhaps detect fraudulent actions going on, or maybe predict some future demand and things like that. So that's where integration engine like Integration Bus really is very important.
And I can see exactly where if you've got an enterprise, and very similar to Leif's point, if you started off with one or two applications that connect to each other, integration is not so much of an issue. But when you're trying to link together varying applications, or maybe some are legacy, some have got various interfaces that you've inherited, the last thing you want to do is start writing those output interfaces, those applications bespoke for each one.
Yes.
Because the overhead of doing that would be just horrific. And I can see how this integration layer, again, like messaging, abstracts that logic away from them. Phenomenal. So that seems like a great time to move into IIB and tell us a bit about what it is and how that relates to the concept of integration.
Yeah, sure. So IIB, IBM Integration Bus, is a collection of technology which abstracts the complexity of integration. So, for instance, he has a number of built-in connectors to connect to back-end systems and different protocols there. And so you don't need to go down to the bits and bytes level. It has the concept of message formats, some of them built in and some of them you can actually define yourself. So you, again, abstract yourself from the complexities of the bits and the bytes of things. And then it comes to actually, moving the data around between the different endpoints. And moving that data around to the different endpoints is done in the way of creating a flow within Integration Bus. And the flow is created simply by a drag and drop interface, where you wire connectors with functional nodes. And these functional nodes can filter and transform and aggregate and do all the sort of things that you want to do with your data in order to complete an application or a service which you can then use.
Awesome. Yeah, I've used IIB a number of times, and even back when it was called Broker. And one of the things I really liked about it was its very intuitive drag and drop interface. So you create your flows. You could take an input, you push out to an output, and back then it was MQ, which we used under the covers, which worked really, really well. But I guess the next question would be, how has that relation with MQ evolved? Do you still have to have MQ?
Yeah, really good question actually. And there has been a very close relationship between Integration Bus and MQ over a number of years, and the reason being is the importance of transactionality, the importance of, one, not losing a message and also not duplicating a message. If that message is carrying a transaction which is worth $1 million, you do not want to debit an account twice by accident, for instance. So a long-term relationship there between the two of them. Now, with Integration Bus version 10, we've made that relationship a lot more flexible. Now, you could highlight the point that there are now potentially some applications that Integration Bus can be used for, which doesn't require MQ to be there. And perhaps this is where non-critical data is being delivered to a browser. And if the browser session fails, you can always press refresh and you can get it again. So non-critical. So potentially, you can see applications like that. But what we've done with version 10 is to provide a great deal more flexibility with the relationship with MQ. Up to, but not including version 10, that relationship was always one-to-one.
Yep.
So for every instance of Integration Bus, you had an instance of an MQ queue manager associated with it and co-located with it as well. So with version 10, we've made that a lot more flexible, so that if you have an existing, a set of MQ applications within your enterprise and you want to put Integration Bus on top of that, you don't need to disturb the MQ as much as you would have in the past, because Integration Bus can connect to now remote rather than co-located instances of MQ.
Okay.
It doesn't have to have that one-to-one relationship. So you can have multiple Integration Bus instances connecting to a single MQ instance as well. So key word there is it's very, very flexible in terms of how we actually link ourselves together.
I must admit, from playing with myself, I really like the way that the integration with MQ and Broker and IIB were so simple in terms of, for example, an input node, where you put a queue in, and that will be it, a queue name in, and you can connect to it and take a match of it. Really, really nice, very simple, very, very intuitive. Okay, so in terms of transforming your enterprise, how does IIB help you drive that change?
Right, yes. So let's go back to what I started talking about, where you have all those back-end systems all trying to communicate with each other. And of course, when you have a situation like that, when you haven't got Integration Bus in place, it means you have a very, very complex nature of your applications, and that complex nature is very difficult to maintain. And so what you do find over time as your backend systems grow in terms of numbers is that the maintenance costs skyrocket. They actually are exponential in terms of maintenance costs because of the complexity. And so an enterprise tends to spend more and more money then on maintaining the systems it's got, and less money free then to think about what are the strategic needs of my enterprise in terms of integration and in terms of where we're going for the goals that we have in the marketplace. Now, So in terms of transforming your enterprise, integration bus, when you put it into the enterprise, you simplify things, you abstract things to make them simpler as well, you reduce those maintenance costs, and by reducing those maintenance costs, you've got more opportunity then to think about those strategic goals, those win points in the marketplace which you want to go after.
Yeah, so I guess you're not spending all that resource and time and effort maintaining your systems continuously, or maintaining your applications, because they're abstracted away.
They're abstracted away, yeah.
With
So
IBM.
all that low-level coding which you were done in the past, instead it's done by integration bus. It's contained within a pre-canned node, which does the function for you at a higher level.
And so your IT department can then focus on actually supporting your business rather than all the time trying to fight fires with people.
Yeah, and there's two good words here. It's all about simplicity, and it's all about agility, and it's about supporting your business. You know, the simplicity and the agility, it gives you that ability to evolve what you're doing to achieve your goals.
That is phenomenal. So, Mike, thank you very much indeed. So now we come on to the awesome Matt. Hello, Matt. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Joe. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. So, Matt, the final piece we're going to talk today is the fantastic API management. Could you give us an introduction to that?
Yeah, sure. So the goal of API management, as you would hope from the name of the product, is to manage APIs. So we would kind of pick up from where Mike was describing, maybe you have a service in IIB as a web service or a REST service, for example. And the goal of API management is really to manage that in front of the back-end service provider, IIB or other offerings. So the kind of basic life cycle is to define your API, so import the definition, which might be via a Swagger file or a WSDL file if you have a SOAP service, to decide what security you want to apply to that. So you might choose to have basic auth security or OAuth 2.0 or kind of a range of other aspects that we have around security, to decide whether applications can call that service without needing to register with you, or whether you have to kind of have an enforced sign-up process.
Okay.
Then socialize that API that you've defined to your consumers, application developers that might be inside your own organization, they might be kind of public on the internet, they might be partners as well. So to do that socialization, and then kind of make the API available to them, they start invoking it, and then finally kind of completing the loop to kind of analyze the usage of that service. So there are various kind of interfaces or functions that you want to achieve through API management. There's obviously a view for the provider of the API, where they're going to bring in the definition of the API, apply that security, decide if they want to apply rate limiting, for example, all those sorts of things. Then there's the application developer portal, which is where we socialize the APIs. So there's a brandable, themable portal that we provide as part of the product. You can customize that to your own corporate branding. And so if you have a particular IBM.com theme that you want to provide, for example, or your own kind of customer branding, you can certainly do that. And then there's obviously the kind of runtime API call path, where applications are going to invoke these managed APIs through API management, which is based on IBM's data power security appliance. So we get all the benefits and the strengths of the data power heritage in enforcing API traffic. Cool.
So it's kind of a newer term in integration and meshing. So why is API management so important?
So I think there are a number of kind of key benefits that customers get. We obviously work very closely with our customers and prospective customers to understand what their pain points are. One of the kind of key ones is about visibility of use of services. So we have one particular customer in London I'm working with at the moment. They have a lot of existing services they make available to partners, but they don't really have any way of understanding who's using them.
Right.
So when we were talking about them to kind of understand what the workload is, it took them something like 2 weeks to come up with the information that said, well, we're having this many millions of API calls per day or per week for these particular services. So a large part of API management is to help you have a visibility of who is consuming your services. So I mentioned that application developers can be required to sign up, they register an identity for their application. That then feeds into all the analytics we do to understand, well, this application has made 150,000 API calls on Monday, but none on Tuesday, or those sorts of things, and lets you understand the consumption patterns. And then the kind of some of the other things are around reaching new channels effectively. So I have core business services that my enterprise is known for, the particular skill that I have, undoubtedly underpinned by IIB and NQ and similar products. How do I make that available to a broader marketplace? Can I reach out into new kind of, maybe it's a white labeling channel, or to new partners? what's my experience in onboarding a new partner? So one of the other customers we work with has an onboarding process. There's a series of steps that their partners go through to gain access to a service. And currently that takes about 3 weeks because there's a lot of manual process work in there. There's some contract signing, obviously. And what we do with API management is to give the option to make that onboarding process a much more developer-led self-service sign-up process. So for certain use cases, you can have an application developer sign up literally in minutes and start consuming your API. Maybe you provide a freemium plan that lets them try things out for a little bit of time, and then kind of have the contractual arrangement or the more legal stuff as an asynchronous process. You can then upgrade them to a premium plan later on once they've got the necessary legals in place.
Fantastic. So it sounds like API management really helps drive innovation from both internal and external developers who can create new offerings using your backend applications that may not have been directly generating revenue for you. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of the scenarios that we work with customers on are public-facing scenarios. So either kind of partner integration where you have an existing relationship, you want to make it easier for partners to consume those services or onboard quicker, as I was describing. There are other cases where you're looking to publish a kind of true public API. Maybe it's something that sits behind your existing public website. The data is sufficient that you're willing to provide free access to it in order to get the message out there and give kind of application developers at large on the internet the chance to take your services and combine them with other offerings and create real kind of composite value, as it were.
That's really awesome. So you've got that. You used to have that really in the dark times. You used to have this awful experience where you might phone for a taxi to go on holiday, for example, and then you'd phone and try to arrange a plane, and you'd phone and arrange a hotel, and you'd find that the plane was delayed. You'd go back and we'd do it all over again. Whereas now, I guess what you're saying is those applications may well be in different companies or enterprises, but because of API management, you could link those services together and create a whole experience, end-to-end experience.
Exactly. So it's about each of those kind of sources of data, whether it's the airplane example or the taxi example. If each of those enterprises provides an API, application developers outside of any single company can aggregate those things together and can provide this embedded composite application that gets the benefit of all of them in a way that none of the individual organizations would ever have thought to do.
Fantastic. So is that difficult? Is it difficult to expose a back-end application out to developers?
So the great answer is it's very easy.
Fantastic.
Who would have thought? So for typical cases when we're doing demonstrations to customers, then it's less than 5 minutes to kind of go through that process of defining and securing and managing the API and getting the benefit from the analytics. What we're actually finding with customers is that the bigger piece of work, if you like, is around making sure that you have a well-designed API, because there's an element of art form to making sure your API is the right sort of structure. The same applies for API management as it does with IIB and other sorts of products. But the act of placing it into API management is very simple, and it's very quick and easy to begin getting the value from the sorts of things that we provide in the product.
Marvelous. So to summarize, how would you say API management helps drive transformation for your enterprise?
Yeah. So I think there are points externally. So looking at reaching new channels is a key one. So maybe in a retail scenario, you have a call center, website, a mobile application, physical stores, making sure they each have a consistent view of the data underpinned with a single API that's used from all those different channels, driving back-end data services from IIB and MQ, for example. So that's one of the kind of key external ones, but at the same time, there's also a very valid internal use case where customers of ours are using API management just within their own enterprise, so not looking externally or to partners, but helping maybe between lines of business or between different projects, expose those sorts of data services in a much more free and easily consumable fashion, and at the same time tracking the usage and making sure that you understand where the links are in between the different parts of your enterprise.
Marvelous. And again, if anyone's out there, you want to try out this technology, particularly business partners, come drop me a line, tweet in on the IIB Hursley Twitter channel, get in contact, and we'll hook you up with some of the fantastic hardware and software here with your business partners completely free. So lastly, guys, where can we find out more information about our good stuff? Leif, in terms of messaging, where would you recommend that someone is keen to go?
Okay, well, I mean, you can very easily start on our just IBM website on MQ.
Yeah.
You can maybe link from there. There's an area in the IBM website called Developer Works.
Yeah.
You can go there. There's lots of discussion, lots of hints and tips. You can download our MQ software for free for development use, so that's a great start. And if you really want to read some insight, if you're familiar with Redbooks in IBM, so IBM Redbooks, go onto the IBM Redbooks site, search for MQ. We've got primers, we've got best practices, what's new, all those sorts of areas for information.
Fantastic. And yourself, Mike, in terms of integration?
Well, I can echo everything that Leif has said, and we do have a developer edition as well, which is freely downloadable. It's full function, and you can use it for development unit test purposes, so that's great. And we also, of course, recently have IBM Integration Bus on cloud as well.
That's right, yeah.
And of course, that means you don't even need to have hardware to install Integration Bus on to try it. You can do a trial on the cloud and try it out on the cloud. So yeah, everything Leif said, plus that.
Marvellous. And Matt, yourself?
Pretty much what they said. So we also have a developer website. So if you go to developer.ibm.com/API management, that'll get you into our landing page.
Yeah.
And there's lots of great videos in there, kind of tutorials, example use cases, all those sorts of things. One of the links that you'll get from that landing page is off to our public SaaS offering. So that's a free hosted 30-day trial. Or you can also get to it through Bluemix as well. There's a kind of freemium mechanism through Bluemix. So yeah, give it a go.
So go to your Google prompt and type the name of the product.
Fantastic. So you heard it here first, use Google. So if you want to have a play with our technology, get in contact with us. Contact me, John McNamara. I've got my email in the description of the video. Particularly if you're a business partner, you can come and use our facilities here in the Innovation for free. Use technology and hardware. So guys, we'll say thank you so very much for turning up and giving us a great talk today. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you everyone for joining and tuning in. Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.